chapter 52. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. For through the anger of the Lord did it come to pass in Jerusalem and Judah, until he had cast them out from his presence. And Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, did Nebuchadrezzar the king of Babylon came, he and all his army, against Jerusalem, and encamped against it, and they built forts against it round about. So the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah. And in the 4th month, in the 9th day of the month, the famine was sore in the city, so that there was no bread for the people of the land. Then a breach was made in the city, and all the men of war fled, and went forth out of the city by night by the way of the gate between the two walls, which was by the king's garden. Now the Chaldeans were against the city round about, and they went by the way of the Arabah. But the army of the Chaldeans pursued after the king, and overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho, and all his army was scattered from him. Then they took the king, and carried him up unto the king of Babylon in Riblah, the land of Hamath, and gave judgment upon him. And the king of Babylon slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and slew also all the princes of Judah in Riblah. And he put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon bound him in fetters, and carried him to Babylon, and put him in prison till the day of his death. Now in the 5th month, in the 10th day of the month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, who stood before the king of Babylon into Jerusalem. And he burned the house of the Lord, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, even every great man's house burned he with fire. And all the army of the Chaldeans that were with the captain of the guard broke down all the walls of Jerusalem round about. Then Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive of the poorest sort of the people, and the residue of the people that remained in the city, and those that fell away, that fell to the king of Babylon, and to the residue of the multitude. But Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left of the poorest of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. And the pillars of brass that were in the house of the Lord, and the bases and the brazen sea, and that were in the house of the Lord, did the Chaldeans break in pieces, and carried all the brass of them to Babylon. The pots also, and the shovels, and the snuffers, and the basins, and the pans, and all the vessels of brass wherewith they ministered, took they away. And the cups, and the fire pans, and the basins, and the pots, the candlesticks, and the pans, and the bowls, that which was of gold, and gold, and that which was of silver, and silver, the captain of the guard took away. The 2 pillars, the 1 sea, and the 12 brazen bulls that were under the basins, which King Solomon had made for the house of the Lord, the brass and all the vessels was without weight. And as for the pillars, the height of 1 pillar was 18 cubits, and a line of 12 cubits did compass it, and the thickness thereof was 4 fingers, it was hollow. And the capital of brass was upon it, and the height of the 1 capital was 5 cubits, and the network of pomegranates upon the capital round about, all of brass. And the 2nd pillar also had like unto these, and pomegranates. And there were 96 pomegranates on the outside. All the pomegranates were 100 upon the network round about. And the captain of the guard took Seraiah, the chief priest, and Zephaniah, the 2nd priest, and the 3 keepers of the door. And out of the city he took an officer that was over the men of war, and 7 men of them that saw the king's face, who were found in the city, and the scribe of the captain of the host, who mustered the people of the land, and 60 men of the people of the land, that were found in the midst of the city. And Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took them, and brought them to the king of Babylon to Riblah. And the king of Babylon smote them, and put them to death in Riblah, in the land of Hamath. So Judah was carried away captive out of the land. This is the people whom Nebuchadrezzar carried away captive in the 7th year, 3,000 Jews and 23. And in the 18th year of Nebuchadrezzar, from Jerusalem, 832 persons. In the 23rd year of Nebuchadrezzar, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captain of the Jews 745 persons. All the persons were 4,600. And it came to pass in the 37th year of captivity of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month, in the 25th day of the month, that Evil-Merodach, king of Babylon, in the first year of his reign, lifted up the head of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, and brought him forth out of prison. And he spoke kindly to him, and set his throne above the thrones of the kings that were with him in Babylon. And he changed his prison garments, and he did eat bread before him continually all the days of his life. And for his allowance there was a continual allowance given him of the king of Babylon, every day a portion, until the day of his death, and all the days of his life. All right. Let's go back up to verse 1. Now we remember this story. This is added there at the end of Jeremiah, because this is the great prophecies and these things that come to pass in the time of Jeremiah, and this is what Jeremiah witnessed, and this was what Jeremiah seen, this one whom God appointed. He was the prophet, and we're going to pick it up. This story is about Zedekiah. Zedekiah, we remember, we can find part of Zedekiah there. He will come in on the 24th chapter, 2 Kings, and he will go out there on the 25th chapter, 2 Kings. And we could find a little bit about Zedekiah, a little more, and scattered out among the book of Jeremiah here. But Zedekiah means the justice of my God, or the judgment of my God. And we're going to go ahead and pick it up here in verse 1. And Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And Zedekiah, this justice of God, this judgment of God, was 20 years old. 1 means the beginning, and 20 means redemption. Redemption because there's 2 tens, and 2 tens is to witness the law. In this greater understanding, that's what a year is. It's the culmination of many days, and many days are little understandings. And we take all the little understandings and we put them together to try to get a greater understanding out of all things. And he began to reign, and that was the beginning of his reign, was this beginning of redemption in the greater understanding. And he reigned for 11 years in Jerusalem. And 11 years is the law also had a beginning in the greater understanding in this Jerusalem, in this place of peaceful teachings. And his mother's name was Hamutal. She was the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah, and Hamutal was also the mother of Jehoiakim. And Hamutal means my father-in-law is in the midst. And what it is if we listen to it real close, what it really means is our protection. And Hamutal means that father in the law is our protection. And she is the daughter of Jeremiah, this one whom God appointed, this one whom was appointed by God. And he was from that place of Libnah. And that place is made where it's made white. Because to do this means to bleach out. And what we're doing is we're trying to bleach out a stain. 2. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. And we'll find Zedekiah did do that which was evil. The people did sin under Zedekiah, and Zedekiah's rebellion was really all about trying to seize a place for Zedekiah. And he did according to evil in the sight of God, and he did according to all that Jehoiakim, this one that God had stood up, had done. 3. For through the anger of the Lord did it come to pass in Jerusalem and Judah, until he had cast them out of his presence. And Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. And because of the anger of God, that because they had turned from the law of God, and they had turned into their sin, abominations, and idolatry, doing after all the ways of the nations that God had brought against them, that they had left in the land from the beginning. So it came to pass on that place of teachings, and that peaceful teachings, and that place of praisings, until God had literally just cast them out of his presence. And Zedekiah, that judgment of God, he rebelled against the king of confusion. And it came to pass now, verse 4, in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadrezzar, the king of Babylon, came, he and all his army, against Jerusalem, and encamped against it, and they built forts against it round about. And that's what happened in the 9th year. And the 9th year is that harvest that's portioned out in the greater understanding of the reign, and we'll find out that reign would be the reign of the judgment of God. And the 10th month, and that 10th month is that portion of the law that's sectioned out or cut away and set to the side of that lesser light. For see, the month is measured by the moon, and the moon is given as that over the lesser light, that lesser understanding even, in the 10th day. And that was the portion of the law for the understanding of that lesser light. That Nebuchadrezzar, the king of Babylon, came. And Nebuchadrezzar is that prophet that protects the crown. He is the king of Babylon. He is the king of confusion. He and all his army came against that place of peaceful teachings and encamped against it and built forts against it all around. And so the city was besieged, verse 5, unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah. And the siege did last till the 11th year. The armies of Nebuchadrezzar was camped all around to the 11th year. And that's, the 11th is 1 and 10, because that's how it would be written. Until the beginning of the law that was apportioned out to the greater understanding of the judgment of God. 6. And in the 4th month, in the 9th day of the month, the famine was sore in the city, so that there was no bread for the people of the land. And in the 4th year, and in the 4th month, verse 6, the 4th month, 4, is always the work of God. And that's what's been cut and portioned out to the lesser light, this work of God. See, and in the 9th day is that harvest of these lesser understandings of the lesser light, this darkness and light God has put upon the earth to show us these evil ways, even this wickedness men have done, to show us God. He is God, and he does these things. The famine was sore in the city, so that there was no bread for the people of the land. And this famine is even this famine in the end time, when there is no bread for the people of the land. And this bread represents these understanding that comes from the law of God. See, that was the bread that was set before the Lord. 7. Then a breach was made in the city, and all the men of war fled, and went forth out of the city by night by the gate between the two walls, which was by the king's garden. Now the Chaldeans were against the city round about, and they went by the way of the Arabah. So, finally, in the 9th day, and it happened at night, a breach was made in the city. A hole was made, a break was made, and the armies of the Chaldeans were coming in. And all the men of war fled, and they went forth of the city by the way of the gate between the two walls. And now witness these two walls, because the one wall was created by the king, and it was reinforced there, and he had made a gate out, and it was by the king's garden, even by the garden where the king, this place where the king would sow, and this place where he would bring forth a harvest. And now the Chaldeans, all the wisest of the land, were against the city all around, and they had the city surrounded, and they went by the way of the Arabah. And that Arabah is that land. It's a dry land. It's a parched land. It's a land that's not really hospitable. 8. But the army of the Chaldeans pursued after the king, and they overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho, and all his army was scattered from him. And the armies of the Chaldeans, these wise ones, chased now after the king when he tried to flee the city. Zedekiah, this justice of God, this judgment of God even, in the plains of Jericho. And we remember Jericho. Jericho was that city God said you should not rebuild, but we'll find that they did rebuild that city, and they rebuilt that city a long time ago. 9. Then they took the king and carried him up unto the king of Babylon, to Riblah, land of Hamath, and gave judgment upon him. And they did. They took Zedekiah and those men that were with him, and they took him up to Riblah, that place that was made white, it was in the land of Hamath. And Hamath is that fortress. We remember Hamath. It's that fortress of walls. It's that fortress of walls. And they gave judgment upon him. And the king of Babylon judges Zedekiah. 10. And the king of Babylon slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. And he slew also the princes of Judah in Riblah. And this king of confusion slew the sons of Zedekiah. He slew the king and his sons, this justice of God, this judgment of God. But see, God had done this to show you this is the one hand, see, the judgment of God, and then this is going to be the other hand. But this is even an example of all those things that are going to happen, see. These are the prophecies. 11. And he put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon bound him in fetters, and carried him to Babylon, and put him in prison till the day of his death. In this eyes he put out the visions of Zedekiah, even the sight, that which we perceive with. Zedekiah was the judgment of my God, and he was the king, and the king of Babylon bound him in fetters. So he binds him up, ties him up. He's taken away a prisoner to confusion, and he puts him there in the prison until the day of his death, and that's where Zedekiah would remain. 12. Now in the 5th month, in the 10th day of the month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, who stood before the king of Babylon, into Jerusalem. So now, in this portion of grace of the lesser light, because these are the smaller teaching, God wanted to show you. Now, he's making example after example after example, and this is another portion. See, God's graceful, God's merciful in all things. He's trying to teach you, trying to instruct you, and bring you by the way. In the portion of grace now to the lesser light, in the 10th day of the month, even that portion of the law, in the lesser understanding of the lesser light. See, because there's got to be a portion of the law. There's those that the law is separating, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadrezzar. This 19th, well, see, this is the harvest from the law that's portioned out for the greater understanding of King Nebuchadrezzar, this prophet that protects the crown. He's the king of confusion. Came Nebuzaradan, this prophet, the prophet. He is the prophet who is casting seeds. He's the prophet who brought contention. He's the prophet who sowed these seeds even in the land. The captain of the guard. He was over all the he was over the prison houses and all the prisons who stood before the king of Babylon. He's the one that stood there before the king of confusion. And they came into this place of peaceful teachings. 13, and he burned the house of the Lord, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Even every great man's house burned he with fire. And Nebuzaradan burned the king's house, and the Lord's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem. All these houses of the place of peaceful teachings, these mighty men's houses, who God once again was making an example of. He says, I'm going to drive you out of here. I'm going to run you out. And he burned them with fire. And this fire was the fire that comes from the law of God. This judgment of God even is what it represents. See, God accomplishing his will. God said, I'm going to do this. And God did. See, God establishes these things. And then God makes them to come to pass quickly. 14. And all the army of the Chaldeans that were with the captain of the guard broke down all the walls of Jerusalem round about, and all the armies of these wise ones that were with the captain of the guard, with Nebuzaradan, broke down all the walls of Jerusalem round about. So they knocked all the walls down that was all around this place of peaceful teachings. The king's walls, the inner walls even. 15. Then Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captain of the poorest sort of people, and the residue of the people that remained in the city, those that fell away, and fell to the king of Babylon, and to the residue of the multitude. And those that fell away to the king of Babylon, these that went off out into the king of Babylon, into confusion, the ones who was traitors in the land, you might say, those ones who had fell away or had promised to do these things in return for favors, all those that remained in the city, and the residue of the multitudes. 16. But Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left off the poorest of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. And Nebuzaradan left these ones. These were the poorest of the land. These were the ones that didn't have much. They didn't have nothing. And this is including understanding. This is to include the teachings. And they're set there to be the vine dressers and the husbandmen, to take care of this place, even Jerusalem, that area, those places of peaceful teachings. This is a period where there's little understanding. There's little wealth in the Word of God. There's going to be little substance that come from it, because we'll find that they didn't know how to dress the vine. 17. And the pillars of brass that were in the house of the Lord, and the bases of the brazen sea that were in the house of the Lord, did the Chaldeans break in pieces, and carried all the brass of them to Babylon. And these pillars of brass, we remember these two pillars of brass which Solomon raised up. We're going to confirm this in a minute. It's what we're talking about. These two pillars, even of brass, these two great pillars that were in the house of the Lord. And these two pillars of brass is cold darkness is what it stands for. And these two are the witness now, because that's what stood before the house of the Lord, and the bases and the brazen sea that were in the house of the Lord. And the Chaldeans broke them in pieces and took it all off to confusion, to Babylon. And this, all the brass of this stuff, and that's what we're talking about, all the cold darkness of it, and all the rule of it that was held within the two pillars, has now been carried off into confusion, and is on all the earth. 18. The pots also, and the shovels, and the snuffers, and the basins, and the pans, and the vessels of brass wherewith they ministered, took they away. And these pots, we ain't going to spend a lot of time on these things, because we'll have time to deal with all these later. These pots, though, they represent those things where they stew and they cook in. And it's like a cauldron. And these shovels, literally almost what it means, these things that they shove all around with this mighty one. And what they are is like a big spoon paddle, or even something that they would reach down and move the meats out of the way and shove them out of the way. Of course, we know they had flesh hook too, and they'd reach in there and snatch a piece out. And these snuffers and these basins, these snuffers, all these things are utensils that were used to do the business of the temple. And every one of these things has a greater and higher understanding. And the understanding of it takes quite a while to explain. So, but basically what they did was they took all these utensils away that God had all this cold darkness stored up in. See, and all these things that they used to minister to God with, it all had great understanding, and kept all the evil out of the land, kept all this evil understanding away. 19. And the cups and the fire pans and the basins and the pots, the candlesticks and the pans and the bowls, that which was of gold and gold, and that which was of silver and silver, the captain of the guard took away. And these are the cups and the fire pans, all these utensils that God had a great amount of energy stored up into that prevented this evil, and God was using these things now in great symbology to teach us that these things have to be contained. God even separating here these utensils of gold and silver. Gold, now, that gold's that which belongs to God, and these are the things that represent God in the beginning. And this silver is these things that's had to pass through the fire because of the lack of understanding of men. These things have been caused to pass through the fire, and they are hallowed unto the God. These things are hallowed unto God, and none of these things should have ever been touched except for somebody who had great understanding. But now they've carried them off, and they're trying to use them in Babylon. 20. The 2 pillars, the 1 sea, and the 12 brazen bulls that were under the bases which King Solomon had made for the house of the Lord. The brass and all these vessels without weight. And the brass was without weight. And this cold darkness and these things that God had hemmed up in all that stuff. He had pent up in all that stuff. These 2 pillars, once again, these 2 pillars. Now witness these 2 pillars. These pillars that Solomon had made and stood before the house of the God, because we're going to describe them. This 1 sea, and this 1 sea is this 1 sea was to represent 1 people and great understanding. The 12 brazen bulls, these 12 even, this understanding. 12 means the law and to witness it. That means understanding. And this brazen bulls, and these ones that were in this cold darkness that we're pulling now, and we'll find out what was setting on them. This 1 sea, all the weight of the earth was setting on these 12 that was under the base and that King Solomon had made. All these have great symbology and great meaning. And this brass is all the cold darkness that's held within all that power right there that God is trying to show you is broken, taken away by the king of confusion. 21. As for the pillars, these 2 witnesses, this 1 pillar was 18 cubits. The line 12 cubits that compassed it, and the thickness thereof was 4 fingers, and it was hollow. And the pillars, these 2 pillars that we've been talking about, that I've been bringing up, these 2 pillars, and the witness now these 2 pillars, because these 2 pillars stood before the house of the Lord, and they're witnesses. The height of 1 pillar was 18 cubits, and the height of 1, that was the beginning pillar that was set there, was 18 cubits, and the 18, the law might have a new beginning. There'd be a new beginning in the law, 8 and 10, and the cubit is the measurement thereof, and this is what it was for. And the line was 12 cubits that did compass it, and in it was all the understanding that was purposed for it. See, in this line of cubits that did go around, it was a string. If you wrap a string around something and stretch it out to measure it, that's what it is, see. And it goes around, and it's just an understanding that keeps going around, and that's what God purposed from the beginning with the first witness. And the thickness thereof was 4 fingers, and it was hollow, because the thickness of it, the breadth thereof, at the period of time it'll last, is the work of God, see. And these fingers are those that which accomplish it. It's hollow inside. See, it's hollow because this God causes these things to come to pass. And it just goes around. 22. And the capital of brass was upon it. And the height of the 1 capital was 5 cubits. It was 5 cubits, and the network and pomegranates upon the capital round about. All of the brass, and the 2nd pillar also had like unto these, and pomegranates. And the capital, the top, the crown, the head of it all, was cold darkness. And there was cold darkness that was upon it. And the height of it, the 1 capital, see, now, this beginning of this capital, this crown, because, see, this crown is even going to be the 2nd period that God does this 2nd, was 5 cubits. There was grace in its length. There's grace laid out for it. It's the line put upon it. It's the measurement of it. And the network and the pomegranates and were upon it round about. And this pomegranates represents this unacceptable. It's not acceptable to God, these pomegranates. Even this fruit that God they had partook of, God saying not to, all of brass, all this was the cold darkness. And the second pillar, see, the second one, the other witness, also had like unto these pomegranates, this unacceptable fruit, all about it. 23. And there were 96 pomegranates on the outside. All the pomegranates were 100 upon the network round about. And there were 96 pomegranates. These pomegranates, once again, they're going to represent this fruit that God doesn't accept. But now, there were 96. Why? Because there's a harvest in the law in this 6, the work of man. 6 represents 6 days shall you do your work. See, 6 is the work of man. There's a harvest in the law and from the work of man in this fruit that he doesn't find acceptable. God's going to make something good out of it. See? And all the pomegranates were 100 upon the network round about. And this 100 represents judgment. See? Judgment of God. 10, 10. And that's what we find when the children of Israel, God says this 10 times, you've angered me. See? There's judgment. There's judgment in the law upon the network round about. And that was the purpose of these two pillars, these two examples, these two witnesses even. 24. And the captain of the guard took Seraiah, the chief priest, and Zephaniah, the second priest, and the 3 keepers of the door. And the captain of guard, we'll get back on to what's going on there. He's the Nebuchadnezzar. He brings up Seraiah, and we remember Seraiah, this one who contended with my God. He was the chief priest. And Zephaniah, this treasure that's hidden, this hidden treasure of my God, he was the second priest. And the 3 keepers of the door, and the 3 keepers of the door, because these keepers of the door, these was the ones that would complete it. These were the keepers of the door. 25. And out of the city he took an officer that was set over the men of war, and 7 men of them that saw the king's face, who were found in the city, and the scribe of the captain of the host, who mustered the people of the land, 80 men of the people of the land that were found in the midst of the city. So he also gathers up, besides these 2, and the 3 keepers of the door, these 5, which is going to be the grace, and the city. He also took out of there the men of war, 7 men of them that saw the king's face. This officer, though, that he took out of the men of war, this one who was over the charge, who was given charge over the men of war, who weren't able to defend the city, we'll find. And these 7 men, these 7 was to complete now, or perfection, it's perfection is what it is, to accomplish those that had seen the king's face, those that had beheld, those that had actually just took part in this and in the king's plan, who were found in the city, and the scribe of the captain of the host, who mustered the people of the land. And this scribe, he represents this one who would recount. See, recount it, go over it, make sure it was known exactly what happened. And 80, these 80 was to complete the redemption of men and the people of the land, that were found in the city. 26. And Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took them and brought them to the king of Babylon in Rivlah. And Nebuzaradan, he's the captain of the guard. He's the one gathering all these people up, having them gathered up. He's going to decide the number and everything else. He's this prophet that sowed the seed of discontent, you might say. He's the one who was sowing these seeds. He's the captain of the guard, and he took them and brought them to Babylon, and to that place of confusion, to Rivlah, that fruitful place, that fertile place that's made fruitful. 27. And the king of Babylon smote them and put them to death at Rivlah in the land of Hamath. So Judah was carried away captive out of the land. And these ones are praising, this is how it was done. This is how the king of Babylon, this king of confusion, smote them and put them to death in Rivlah. Rivlah is that fruitful place. It's a fertile place, and that's fruitful. and it's in the land of Hamath. That Hamath is this fortress of walls they got there that's made out of the heaps and heaps of all the understandings of men. It's in Babylon. 28. And this is the people whom Nebuchadnezzar carried away captive in the 7th year, 3,000 Jews and 23. And these are the peoples. This isn't how many of the people, all the peoples that Nebuchadnezzar carried away captive. In the 7th year now, and in the 7th year would be even this year of Jehoiachin. See, that year of the first captivity that he carried away. This in the 7th year, and the 7th is the accomplishment or the perfection that's been set out for the greater understanding. That's complete fulfillment unto those appraisings, and this complete redemption. And that was the purpose of it. That was the first captivity. 29. In the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar, from Jerusalem, 832 persons. And the 18th year, see this, 18th would be the beginning of the law that was apportioned out in the greater understanding of the prophet that protects the crown from Jerusalem, this place of peaceful teachings. 832. 800 is a new beginning of judgment and the dedication of the witness of people, and that was what it was for. See, God used one set for judgment and one set for redemption. 30. In the 23rd year of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive of the Jews 745 persons. All of the persons were found 1,600. And in the 23rd year now of Nebuchadnezzar, this would be the final carrying away, where they would finally come in and clean up the city, and that period where we just talked about, where he slew them in Riblah. In the 23rd year, that was to complete the redemption that's apportioned out for the greater understanding of the Nebuchadnezzar. He was the prophet that protects the crown, the king of Babylon. Nebuzaradan, this prophet that sows the seed, the captain of the guard, carried away captive of the Jews 745 persons. 700. Now, to accomplish the judgment, see, to accomplish judgment, to the perfection of judgment. These 40 and 5 persons, 40 always represents a period of probation. It's a period that we're witnessing redemption. And 5 persons, because this is a period of grace unto people. All the persons were 4,600, because all of it altogether is the work of God to fulfill all these things. And the 600 is the work of man in judgment, because that's what it amounts to. 31. And it came to pass in the 37th year of captivity of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month, in the 25th day of the month, that evil Merodach, the king of Babylon, in the 1st year of his reign, lifted up the head of Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, and brought him forth out of the prison. It would come to pass, that in the 30th year of the captivity of Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, and this 30th year, because 7, see, and we're talking about that first captivity that was taken now. This perfection, this accomplishment of that which is dedicated, see, that which is dedicated to and portioned out to the greater understanding now of this captivity, of which Jehoiachin, that which God has established, he's the king of Judah. In the 12th month, and this understanding is divided out to the lesser light, in the 25th day, in the grace of redemption that's apportioned out to the understanding now of the lesser light. Evil Merodach, the king of Babylon, and this evil Merodach, this man of rebellion, he's the king of Babylon, this king of confusion. In the 1st year of his reign, now, the 1st year, because here's that new beginning, that beginning of a greater understanding of this rule here. Lift that rule that's just changed hands. Lifted up the head of Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, and brought him forth out of the prison. And this man of rebellion, this one who is the king of confusion now, he lifts up the head of that which God has established. He's the king of Judah. And he brings him out of the prison house. 32, and he spoke kindly to him, and set his throne above the throne of the kings which were with him in Babylon. And he speaks kindly to him, the king of Babylon does, and sets his throne up over all the kings that are in confusion. 33, and he changed his prison garments, and he did eat bread before him continually all the days of his life. And he changed his garments, those garments which he had on, from being a prison garment, from being a garment of one who is brought low, and put on him now a kingly garment, that he might be reign as a king over this land of confusion. And did eat bread before him continually all the days of his life. And these days represent these little understandings now that accumulate into a period of time of his life, this days of his life, all the days of his life. See, forever and ever, as long as he lives, we'll see, as long as he lives. 34. And for his allowance, there was continually allowance given him of the king of confusion, every day a portion until the day of his death, all the days of his life. So as long as he was alive, he got a portion from the king of confusion. His portion was given to him by the king of confusion all the days, every day, every understanding. That was the portion that was given to him all the days of his life. And this is the understanding of his death. All right, we are going to move forward now. We have finished this book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, the one whom God appointed, he was the prophet. He was a man who lived in troublous times, and he witnessed many and many great things. And he warned and told us of all these things that are to come. Even these things are upon us today. To liken unto this is it's the same thing, because he points out, and we're going to find out as we keep going, we are going to see more and more of these wills. God's magnifying his understanding. God is magnifying the understanding through repetitiveness. That's how God works. Through repetitiveness, God does these things. It's a wheel that just keeps going around. This thing's going to keep repeating itself till man comes to understanding. And that understanding boils down to a few words that were spoken in the beginning, that some can hear and some can't hear. See, and God has divided with this law. That is the law of God, see, and God uses it to divide with. So turn and return. Let's move on. We're going to move to the book of Lamentations, because Lamentations is Jeremiah speaking, and there we're going to read the book of Lamentations. I'll see you there.